I thought to myself, there's not much I can do, but I was glad I was being rescued.
For Arlene Hicks, it's still hard to talk about.
There were many, many miracles along the way.
As she recalls everything that happened the afternoon of October 20th. Arlene and her husband Veldon were driving through the Snake River Canyon near Jackson Hole, Wyoming, on their way to watch a granddaughter play volleyball. Veldon was behind the wheel. Arlene had fallen asleep when suddenly she was jolted awake.
The man behind us said that my husband crossed the road and hit the left side and then crossed over to the right side, and we took out 6 rails and our car plunged down into the river.
The car rolled 4 times and ended upright, submerged in the 33-degree water. Arlene wasn't sure what to do.
The sunroof, I looked up and it was opened, but when they got the car out of the river, they said the sunroof was not broke, it had actually opened, which we know is another miracle that I was able to climb out.
A man living nearby witnessed the crash and called his neighbor, off-duty Sergeant Lloyd Funk of the Teton County, Wyoming Sheriff's Office.
I went to the car, or truck, threw the paddleboards in, and kind of drove up to where they said it was in the river.
As Funk worked his way down the 200-foot ledge, another man yelled to a father and son fishing in a boat on the river.
They said, we better put our fishing gear away and go see what's happening.
Funk and the fishermen met up and rowed over to Arlene, who was realizing that her husband of 58 years had likely passed away.
I knew my husband was gone because he would not lift up his head. I kept trying to rescue and get him out of the seatbelt, thinking I need to get him out of the water.
Veldon's body was recovered from the car a few hours later. It was determined he had died of a massive heart attack. As for Arlene, as the men in the boat approached her, they threw her a rope. She took it, tied it around her waist, then made her way to safety.
I said, I bet I'm the biggest fish you've ever caught.
With that sense of humor in the midst of tragedy, Arlene was taken to the shore, where she was then rushed by ambulance to St. John's Hospital in Jackson Hole. Despite the traumatic events, she ended up with only 3 stitches in her ear, 3 broken ribs, and a small crack on her shoulder. Another miracle, she says.
I just feel like I have more to do. My husband was perfect. He had done so many wonderful things, and apparently I have more to do.
A few days later, Sergeant Funk visited Arlene in the hospital, and the fishermen from Minnesota, they stopped by too. And now all of them have developed a close friendship.
Gosh, what a miracle, to have Arlene and have her be safe after, just the crash itself. It's a team effort. Not one person could have come away with the outcome we did that day. It took a group effort.
Arlene says she could go on and on about other miracles that day. The fact her glasses were found sitting gently on a rock near the water without a scratch. The fact that the car went off the road at a spot where witnesses could help. And the fact that the right people happened to be at the right place at the right time to save this mother of 7, grandmother of 31, great-grandmother of 22, and lifetime best friend of Veldon Hicks.
I feel his guidance a lot. I feel his love and care. I will be with him again.
It makes me emotional.
It's been 7 years, but for Katie and Garrett Jones, it's still hard to talk about.
We weren't prepared.
The young couple was excited at their 20-week ultrasound appointment. They were about to find out if they were having a boy or a girl when suddenly their world came crashing down.
It was terrifying, but there was no way that we would give up on our baby.
Katie's pregnancy had been relatively normal. It was the Joneses' first baby, and they wanted everything to be perfect.
We were excited to find out he was a boy. And then afterwards, we met with the doctor, and that's when we first heard about congenital diaphragmatic hernia.
Congenital diaphragmatic hernia. Scary words and a condition the Jones had never heard of. But 1 in every 2,000 infants has CDH. It occurs when the diaphragm does not form properly, and the fetus's organs that should be in the stomach area are pushed up into the chest.
He gave us a number. He said 10% chance of surviving.
He talked about options of aborting the pregnancy.
Katie and Garrett didn't know what to expect, but they did know they were going to fight for baby Gibson. They learned their child would be okay as long as he was inside Katie's womb, but the second he was born, anything could happen.
I kind of researched, how much it would be to have to do a funeral. It felt like I needed to prepare for both sides of it.
A month before Gibson's due date, the Joneses moved from Pocatello to Salt Lake City so their baby could be delivered at the University of Utah. And then on March 30th, 2011, Katie was induced, and 23 hours later, at 6:30 p.m., surrounded by a team of surgeons, Gibson entered the world.
We didn't know if he would be able to make a sound, and we didn't know if he would have any lung tissue to be able to. He took a breath. The phrase, "your first breath took our breath away," literally was that moment for us.
Katie and Garrett didn't even see their baby before he was rushed to the NICU, then transported by a special team next door to Primary Children's Hospital. Gibson was hooked up to several devices, including an ECMO machine, which pumped and oxygenated his blood, but he was alive.
Their chest is huge, right? So he looks like this, and then very skinny at the abdomen area.
The Joneses met their baby a few hours later, and the goal was to keep him stable so doctors could perform surgery and move the organs in his chest to their proper places. Family members came to the hospital, and they were all wearing blue shirts that said Congenital Diaphragmatic Hernia Day 331. That's when Katie and Garrett realized
Gibson was born on the day that his defect is nationally recognized.
4 days went by and things were going well, but then in the middle of the night, a devastating phone call.
He was maxed out on the ventilator, maxed out on medications. They called and said, "Gibson is crashing. You need to come up and prepare to say your goodbyes to your son."
The Joneses went to the hospital and saw their newborn son dying. They prayed and then asked the doctor on call, whom they had never met, to try and perform the surgery that could save their baby.
All medical procedures say don't do the surgery. We just said, can you just try?
Please,
We won't blame it on you,
just give him a chance.
The surgeon agreed, and as active Latter-day Saints, Garrett gave his son a priesthood blessing. The operation began, and after several hours, doctors arrived with good news. Gibson had done fine, and things were looking positive. Now the little baby would need to rest, and his parents anxiously waited as he recovered.
After a month, we finally got to hold him, and I think that was a huge game changer.
1 month after that, the doctor said Gibson could go home to Pocatello. He was still hooked to machines and needed frequent checkups, but he was improving.
He was 2 years old when he got his feeding tube out. He was still on oxygen, not 24 hours a day, but sleeping.
So this is Gibson.
Over the years, things have only gotten better, and now, as Gibson celebrates his 7th birthday on March 31st, CDH Awareness Day, you'd never know this little guy survived the unthinkable and continues to thrive.
Rides bikes, plays soccer. He's a very bright, smart kid. No learning disabilities, no physical disabilities.
We didn't know if he'd survive the pregnancy. We didn't know if he'd survive the birth. We didn't know if he would survive ECMO. We didn't know if he would survive the surgery. And he did. He was a miracle.
Yeah.
Nate Eaton, EastIdahoNews.com.
You don't know what you're going to do until it happens.
Larry Orchard says it seems like just yesterday when he and his wife Joyce nearly died in an explosion and fire inside their camper.
Blew these panels out.
Larry was on his way to hunt with a friend near Mount Bora. The week before, he had unhooked this heater from a gas valve inside the camper, but he forgot to turn the gas line off. Joyce suffered a stroke 8 years ago and can't walk. She was along for the ride when the couple stopped to spend the night and woke up the next morning for breakfast.
So I get up, I try to make the coffee, and I can't I can't get the stove to light.
Larry tried and tried to light the stove, but the gas was silently shooting out of this line where the heater used to sit and filling up the camper. He grabbed a match and the burner finally lit.
I reached up to get the oatmeal and brought it down, and the fire just jumped off the stove top, and the whole room went ka-whoosh, boom, and blew me like a champagne cork right out the door. And the fire's just rolling out of the doorway. And she's in there.
Joyce was sitting on this couch with their dog Spanky.
He stayed right with her on the couch.
With burns on his hands and back, Larry bolted into the 1,500-degree trailer.
And I picked her up, just aimed her at the door, and just chucked her through the door because I couldn't walk her past that torch. And I couldn't take the time, it'd take 5 seconds to walk her out.
Larry ran to shut the gas off, then waited for the flames to die down before using a fire extinguisher to put out the hot spots. Joyce had severe burns on her face, eyes, hands, and inside her throat. With no cell phone signal and the nearest hospital over an hour away, Larry jumped in the truck and took off.
My hands were burned off. I drove with the back of this thumb and my wrist, and then I alternated with my elbows.
The Orchards arrived at the Lost Rivers Medical Clinic in Arco, and Joyce was flown to the University of Utah Burn Center with second-degree burns. What did they end up saying about your wife?
Oh, she's gonna die, yeah. And she looked like a Hiroshima victim.
After 10 agonizing days, Joyce suddenly began improving, and miraculously, she was released from the hospital 5 days later. Since that day, Larry has thought a lot about the fire and says he's fortunate he and Joyce weren't wearing nylon.
Leave the nylon off of you when you're camping. That instantly melts. In 1 second, it's melting and burning. And now you've got a burning, melting, plasticky mess all over you. About there is a ball of fire.
The Orchards admit they're lucky to be alive and know this story could have had a different ending.
I thought I waited or paused or went into shock. I'd have been not here today.
In Chubbuck, Nate Eaton, EastIdahoNews.com.
The love of my life is gone at 36 years old, and I cannot sit back and let this happen anymore.
It's been 6 weeks since Summer Anderson received the worst phone call of her life. Her husband, Adam, was enjoying a winter afternoon on a snowmobile when suddenly an avalanche was triggered, and the young father of 6-year-old Dash, 3-year-old Atlas, and 3-month-old Lake was gone.
Adam had work wrapped up for the day, and I said, "Are you sure you want to go? You know, are you sure it's so late in the day?" And he said, "Yeah, we'll be fine." And, you know, he walked out the door. It was just such an ordinary day.
Adam was an experienced rider and loved being outdoors. Being on a snowmobile was nothing new, and he and some friends went to the Mount Jefferson area of Island Park. He called Summer to tell her they had arrived, and then the group began their adventure.
I saw it on Facebook. East Idaho News covered it, said that there was a snowmobiler and an avalanche, and I knew that that was a popular spot for him and his friends to go. You know, I kept calling and calling and calling, and I wasn't getting any answers. And finally, I called the Fremont County Sheriff's Office, and they put me on hold. And while I was on hold, his best friend called me and said, you know, it was Adam. As soon as he said my name, I picked up the phone, and he said, "Summer." I just knew my husband was gone, and it was devastating.
Since that heartbreaking day, Summer has been determined to turn her tragedy into something good, especially since 2 other men have died in avalanches in our area since Adam passed away less than 2 months ago.
There are 8 kids in Idaho Falls with no dad today because of this. I don't want this to happen anymore. This is happening way too much.
Now this strong young mother is partnering with Action Motorsports to raise awareness of avalanche dangers. On Saturday, a free educational meeting will be held at Action with experts speaking on avalanches. There will also be a raffle with all proceeds being used to purchase avalanche safety kits that snowmobilers in Island Park can use for free while riding.
I get why a lot of people don't buy it because they don't ride 10, 20 times a year, maybe just a couple. But this will allow them to have access to the same safety products that we all want to use. We want every rider coming home safe.
Summer also wants avalanche danger signs posted along highways, similar to those used during wildfire seasons in the summertime.
We need to educate people on how to read snow conditions properly. People need to be more aware of how to read it so that when they go, they're safe.
Summer says this is just the beginning. She and Action Motorsports plan to hold avalanche awareness meetings every year. And although she and her kids are surviving one day at a time,
I just keep telling my son, we're not going to live a sad life.
she hopes her efforts will help other families as she honors the love of her life.
He was vivacious and fun and incredible, and he was a wonderful husband and honestly the world's best dad. In honor of him, I want to make sure that all these riders are coming home because I wish he was home. I do. I would give about anything to bring him home.
In Idaho Falls, Nate Eaton, EastIdahoNews.com.